Welcome to another pre-show. All you patrons, gather round.
Gather round indeed. Come on, all of you, come on down. Even though it's cold, even though it's February, even though some of you have been baking cherry pies for next week's festivities, you know, even so.
It's freezing over here. I'm just checking my watch right now. It's 59 degrees. Can you believe that? It's
You don't want to know what it is outside right now? You want to know what it is here? My sun-kissed child my tender child of the sun-kissed South.
What is it
You
over
want to know
there?
what it is?
Yeah, I
It is
do.
28 degrees and cloudy.
I
And that
don't
ain't no Celsius.
I don't understand how a person can live in such conditions.
Well, what you do is you breathe, you eat, you go from one place to another, you do whatever it is you do. That's how you do it.
But there's
Trust me.
but there's so much pain and suffering, and it's cold. I mean,
We're
cold is
cold.
cold.
It's cold. Let me tell you something. Your great uncle Giovanni throve in the cold. He used to say there's no better time for taking people out to the Pine Barrens than during the cold weather.
Why was that?
Well, because in the heat, in the hotter times, um,
Okay,
dead
there's
dead meat is you can smell it.
yeah, okay.
Whereas when it's cold, it takes a while. So I mean, let's say let's say you had to take an encumbrance out to the Pine Barrens.
Yeah, okay, an encumbrance. Yeah.
An encumbrance. All right, now if you just shoot the encumbrance and it's like July, the vultures, the birds, the bugs, and the stench itself within hours, the encumbrance will be found. But if you take that encumbrance out during this time of year, 28 degrees, nobody's going to smell nothing, and nobody's really inclined to go out and look through the pine barrens, no matter who's missing or what. What's missing? What?
I,
What's missing?
I just don't understand because I mean, aren't you just kicking the can down the road? I mean, it's cold then, but eventually summertime comes around. It's not an
Yeah,
issue
but
then.
the longer the time between the deposit of the encumbrance and its discovery, the harder it is for the authorities to follow the encumbrance back to its place of origin,
I don't know. I feel like
or or discover the identity of the encumberees.
these old timers with their antiquated ways. I mean, nowadays, okay, incineration is the way to go. Okay, let me just say that right now. I don't know
or,
what this.
or, or cancel culture. I mean, nowadays you don't have to make any trips out to. I mean, in our day, it was trips to Vegas or Palm Springs
Hmm.
for
Right.
encumbrances.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it was a bad thing, but I look. I don't feel we can judge our elders. You know, I don't think it's up to us to say, oh, back in those days they were savage, whereas we're much more advanced. Let me tell you, in those days they had a code, the omerta,
Yeah.
and that that was sort of a workers' bill of rights in a sense.
Boy, you really nailed it on that one. That's why I'm laughing.
Well, I mean, as your brother would say, if you accept my premises, my conclusions are easy. But no, that's a long time ago, and nobody does business that way anymore,
Yeah. All right.
except those manicotis.
Now,
Something's got to be done about them.
as long as they stay on their side of the river, that's fine. All right. Um, let's do some questions. We have a lot of questions. We have a lot of literature questions, historical questions. So let's a pretty interesting set of questions here from Helvetia. The
So
thing,
basically, I'm supposed to do what the school system refuses to:
which is,
educate in history and literature.
well, I mean, has the school system officially renounced this as a duty of theirs?
Well, they attacked the authors of literature and history for the most part as holders of privilege who should be despised.
You know, it just occurred as you say this. It just occurred to me that, like, I just always assumed that everyone's history books are like my history books in the '90s, but now I guess I imagine that they're substantially different. But I think I don't want to know how they're different.
Well, sadly, I do. I can only agree with Maya Angelou. I know why the cage bird sings.
Why?
I'm not telling.
Hmm. That's a profound question.
It is. I know why the cage bird sings.
Hmm. Okay.
And you know, I will always be indebted to Maya Angelou for one thing.
What?
Well, she found the grave of Zora Neale Hurston and put a tombstone on it. And she inscribed it in such a way that I think Zora herself would have loved. It says Zora Neale Hurston, her dates, and then a genius of the South. I think Zora would have liked that.
I'm not familiar, so yeah.
Zora was probably one of the, if not the best, black female writers in the United States in the 20th century.
Oh, so that's why I haven't heard of her. Um,
White privilege.
no, like, what did she write? I'm genuinely interested.
Well, she wrote novels. She wrote anthropological studies. Their Eyes Were Watching God, um,
Hmm.
Tell My Horse, and her autobiography, Dust Tracks in a Road. Uh, but she did something terrible that earned her the opprobrium of black and white alike. She wrote a novel called Seraph on the Swanee, in which the major characters were white.
Hmm.
How dare a black woman write about white people? Well, I mean, without demonizing them.
Hmm. Okay. Oh, she wrote about liberation from sexual norms.
Well, that part too. She had issues, but that, oddly enough, that's not my major interest.
Okay.
I mean, there are no more sexual norms, so I think if Zora were alive today, she would think it had gone a little too far. But one of the things that annoyed people was that she was a Republican and a big Eisenhower supporter when she died.
Hmm.
As you know, then as now, blacks were not allowed to be Republicans.
Right. Hmm. It's interesting. They Wikipedia says she's a folklorist too.
Yeah, that's Tell My Horse was about voodoo in Haiti, and she did a really good one on I can't think of the name of it now. In New Orleans, set in Louisiana. I
Hmm.
can't think of the name of it.
Interesting. All right. So anyhow, you're gonna give us an educate. This is what the patrons pay for. Little did they know, they're paying for historical and literature education from you.
Okay, well, fine. If you don't demand it from PS4, then I guess I'll have to give it.
Yeah, the School of Charles Coulombe. Here we go. The first Catholic Supreme Justice was Roger B. Taney, who drafted the infamous Dred Scott decision. He apparently caved to political pressure in that instance. Is that the only black mark in his career?
The only one I know of. I mean, it was otherwise he was an eminent jurist. And again, part of the problem you've got with all this stuff is that we tend to judge everything by what happened afterwards. Obviously, he didn't know about the forthcoming Emancipation Proclamation. Um, I have never yet seen a purely legal discussion of Dred Scott, either for or against, and that's something I'd love to see one day.
Hmm. Dred Scott. So that's a slave who lived in a free state, and they ruled that he was still a slave.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the question that, to be honest with you, I've never read the verdict, and I've never read the legal, uh, I've never read a proper legal treatise of it, only, the emotion filled, etc. I mean,
So what is?
remember in those
Yeah.
days,
No,
in
go on.
those days, the idea was that the courts did not make law, they simply interpreted it. That is to say, they looked to see what was already legal. Um, then, as now, of course, they were affected by outside influences, but I really don't know to what degree the decision was really based purely on law and what degree it really was a political sellout. And I'd love to see something about it. I just haven't read anything like that.
Hmm.
But I don't think anyone should dread Scots. They're wonderful people.
If you say so. All right. Owen Barfield counts as one of the four greatest Inklings, but fewer people know about him than even Charles Williams. Has Barfield been wrongly ignored?
Well, Barfield is by far the hardest to read because Owen Barfield was an anthroposophist.
What is
Now, you're
that?
probably wondering, I knew you were going to say that. How did I know that as soon as I said anthroposophist, you were going to say, what is that? How did I know that?
Is that like esoteric stuff? It's like esotericism or something?
What, you mean like tarot cards in the Haunted Mansion and voodoo?
Something like that. Yeah.
All lumped together in a big pot
Yeah.
and stirred?
Yeah.
Well, if you want to throw everything together, sure. But what it is, it's the esoteric system invented by a man named Rudolf Steiner. And basically, he was the head of the German and Austrian section of the Theosophical Society at the turn of the century, of the last century. When a woman, after Madame Blavatsky died, a woman named Annie Besant became the head of the Theosophical Society. He got into a catfight with her and led most of the German and Austrian members of the society into a separate deal. And that was called the Anthroposophical Society. Anthroposophical as opposed to Theosophical. And it was much more Western oriented. Theosophy is kind of a westernized Hinduism in a way, sort of, kind of. Um, but anthroposophy is much, much more Western. It's still weird, but it's much more Western. Um, its headquarters is in Zurich. Now, you've never heard until now of anthroposophy, but you have heard of the Waldorf schools.
Yeah, like the Waldorf Astoria. Yeah.
No, and not like Waldorf salad either. But Waldorf schools are all over the place. One got burned out in Pasadena in the fire. And these are all schools organized according to Steiner's unique way of educating people. And one of the big emphases is on the Christian festivals, oddly enough. Michaelmas and Christmas and Martinmas and on and on and on. Although in modern times, that's gotten the Waldorf system into a bit of a fight because often Waldorf parents have no Christianity, and they're Jewish or totally secular or whatever, and so that leads to a bit of a scrum. But the reason why I mention all this is that Barfield was a convinced anthroposophist. Now he was an inkling, which means he would read his stuff with the other Inklings. But a lot of it is very difficult for non-anthros to understand. His most well-known book is called Romanticism Comes of Age, which is an apologia for anthroposophy. I have to admit I've never been able to get through it, but that's just me.
All right. What do you think of the Arthurian poetry of Charles Williams? Are these underrated, or is Williams' prose far superior to his poetry?
I wouldn't say it's far superior. I would say it's much more approachable because Williams' poetry presupposes a huge amount of knowledge of Arthuriana on the part of the reader. And if you don't have that, and you don't have a heavily annotated edition, you'll find it very hard to understand. Whereas his prose is very, very, very approachable and very easy to understand. But both Lewis and Tolkien, who had his problems with Williams because of Williams's esoteric interests, nevertheless, they loved his poetry. So did T.S. Eliot.
What do you think of the poetry of Howard Nemerov? He was born in New York City and was a friend of W.H. Auden and Owen Barfield. Now he is mostly known for just one poem, a primer of the Daily Round.
Why don't you read that?
Yeah, I want to read this. So this gentleman lived from 1920 to 1991. And so, primer of the Daily Round. A peels an apple while B kneels to God. C telephones to D, who has a hand on E's knee. F coughs. G turns up the sod. For H's grave, I do not understand, but J is bringing one clay pigeon down, while K brings down a nightstick on L's head. And M takes mustard, N drives to town, O goes to bed with P, and Q drops dead. R lies to S, but happens to be heard by T, who tells U not to fire V for having to give W the word that X is now deceiving Y with Z. Who happens just now to remember A peeling an apple somewhere far away?
Okay.
I kind of like that, to be honest, because that's sort of... I feel like there's some sort of interconnectedness there that is trying to establish. Like it's all part of the alphabet.
That's the point. The thing about his poetry is that some of it's clever, but none of it rhymes. And as a rhyme and meter man myself, I'm sorry. I'm not a big fan.
Okay.
I'm a victim of rhyme and meter.
You're quite a purist. Cause I'm not. I do like the sort of. I don't mind free form. Or is it free form or freestyle?
Free form.
Yeah.
Blank verse.
Blank verse.
Would you like then my mother's imitation beatnik poetry?
I love it actually with the birdseed. Yeah.
No. Okay. Here it is. You ready?
Yeah.
Little bird, with your beak pressed up against the pet shop window, there is no birdseed for you today, only death. Little boy, with your nose pressed up against the candy shop window, there are no jelly beans for you today, only death.
Dude, that's a great poem. I don't care what you say. I don't care that it's a joke. I love that.
Okay, you're welcome to it.
Your mom had a gift.
She wrote a lot of other poems. That one was her satire on beatnik poetry.
All right.
Because it should be done. You got to imagine you're in a coffee house in the village, right, with a bongo drum. Little bird, with your beak pressed up against the pet shop window, there is no birdseed for you today, only death.
All right. Which was better, Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr.'s poetry or Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr.'s jurisprudence?
Ugh. Senior's poetry.
Yeah? Well, tell me about Jr.'s jurisprudence. You're not impressed?
I'd rather, no, not in the slightest. I won't even think about it. But I will give you um, Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. was very funny, even though he was Unitarian and a doctor. But he, let me see. Yeah, he he wrote a parody of the Psalm of Life. I suppose you need to hear the original to get why it's funny. So this is the Psalm of Life by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Now, I love Longfellow. Okay, I do. Well, here it is. What the heart of the young man said to the psalmist, a Psalm of Life. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow finds us farther than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant, let the dead past bury its dead. Act, act in the living present, heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints, and perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. Well, that's very profound and has its points. But Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. wrote this parody. Life is real, life is earnest, and the shell is not its pen. Egg thou art, and egg remainest, was not spoken of the hen. Art is long, and time is fleeting. Be our bills then sharpen well, and not like muffled drums be beating on the inside of the shell. In the world's broad field of battle, in the great barnyard of life, be not like those lazy cattle, be a rooster in the strife. Lives of roosters all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and when roasted, leave behind us head tracks on the sands of time. Head tracks and perhaps another chicken drooping in the rain, some forlorn and henpecked brother, when he sees, shall crow again.
Fascinating.
What? So that both poems left you just utterly dull.
They're fine, for their thing, for their respective what they're trying to do. I respect that. Yeah.
Okay, fine. How about this one? My name is Jan Janssen. I live in Wisconsin. I work in a lumber mill there. Out on the street, the people I meet say to me without care, my name is Jan Janssen. I live in Wisconsin. I work in a lumber mill there. And out in the street, the people I meet say to me without care, my name is Jan Janssen.
Okay, I can't. What is that, like some sort of Inception poem or something where it just
It never ends.
It's quotes and quotes and quotes. It's just ever going.
It just goes on and on and on. My name is Jan Janssen. I live in Wisconsin. Well, I mean, it's a poem, you know.
Yeah. All right. Here's a great question. It seems like the Anglosphere creates all the best works of fantasy. Have German or French writers produced any fantasy as complex and engaging as Tolkien's works?
You know, that's a very, very good and interesting question, and one that has actually intrigued me for quite a while. Um, Not really. I mean, there's been a good deal of supernatural horror. I mean, the tales of Hoffmann and Novalis and the Blue Flower and all that kind of thing, and Chateaubriand, René and Atala, and de Maupassant with his horror tales. But you know, they're really. I mean, Jules Verne, the great science fiction writer, comes to mind, uh, but not like Tolkien. And moreover, it's a little bit like the Arthurian legend. Now, there were a lot of epic stories in the other European countries, but none of them, with the partial exception of the stories of Charlemagne, acquired such a pan-European following as King Arthur. I mean, we have the footsteps of Arthur even here in Austria, you know, in Innsbruck and here in Maria Lansendorf. Uh, there is something about the imagination, I think, of the British Isles that uh, it strikes a chord throughout Europe, and it's pretty unique. Uh, even uh, even the people like Goethe and all that look to Shakespeare for inspiration. Um, Now, that isn't to say that they haven't produced wonderful playwrights and poets and all sorts of tremendous writers of their own. They have, but there is something in the imagination of the peoples of the British Isles that is unique and has carried over to the rest of Europe.
Hmm. Do you have any favorite French poets? What about German poets?
Well, yes, I do. I like Novalis very much. I like Hölderlin. Rilke, I like. And in the amongst the French, uh, I don't like Baudelaire at all, but Bourget, I guess, and what's his name, Barbé d'Aurevilly, although they're better known for prose. Um, no, but I have to admit let me see if I can pull up one of Barbet's poems and a good English translation for you. Uh, yeah, his well, and of course Lamartine. You know, he wrote an ode on Charles X's coronation, which was very good. Uh, Let me see, Rimbaud. Let me see. Je vivais son cœur. Okay, except when I go away. This. All right, now I've got This is Barbet. Let me see if I can turn it back into French, and then I'll read the English. This is the French. Je vivais son cœur. I live without a heart. Je vivais son cœur, tu vivais son flamme, incomplète, mais fait pour un sort plus beau. Tu pris de mes sangs, j'ai pris de ton âme, et tous deux ainsi nous nous partagêmes. Mais c'est toi qui fis le meilleur cadeau. Oui, c'est toi, merci, c'est toi, sainte femme, qui, qui m'a fait sentir le profond amour. Je mis de ma nuit dans ta blancheur d'âme, mais toi, dans la mienne, a mis le grand jour. Je tombais, cet ange fidèle qui suit les cœurs pour ne me suivez pas, pour me soutenir me manquait son aile. Mais Dieu m'entrevit ton cœur et tes bras. Et je t'aime tes bras mieux qu'une aile, car une aile est là. C'est à nous quitter. L'ange, il s'en va lorsque Dieu l'appelle, tandis que des bras savants rester. Which in English is, I lived without a heart, you lived without a flame, incomplete, but made for a more beautiful fate. You took both of my senses, I took of your soul, and both of us thus shared ourselves. But it was you who gave the best gift. Yes, it is you, thank you. It is you, holy woman, who made me feel the deep love. I put my night in your white soul, but you in mine put the great day. I fell. This faithful angel who follows pure hearts did not follow me. To support me, I lacked his wing. But God opened your heart and your arms to me. And I love your arms better than a wing. For a wing, alas, serves to leave us. The winged angel goes away when God calls him, while arms serve to stay.
All right.
I'll bet you didn't know that was French.
You got me. All right, the 30 Years' War seems like the most neglected conflict among historical fiction. Do you think that this war was too grim to produce enjoyable fiction, or should more novelists try to bring this event to life?
Well, Henty wrote The Lion of the North in English. Um, but it was a horrible affair. I mean, no quarter given, no quarter taken, and nobody really emerged looking great out of it, to be honest. There were a few heroes. Tilly, I suppose the prods would say Gustavus Adolphus. Wallenstein, who may or may not have been rightly or wrongly betrayed. I mean, it was just not a nice one at all.
Hmm. All right. Do you prefer Goethe's Faust or Marlowe's Dr. Faustus?
Goethe's Faust, because it has a happy ending.
Hmm.
He's saved. Goethe's Faust is saved because Dr. Faustus is damned, the way he was in the original story.
Hmm.
But Goethe's Faust is saved because he has striven for truth all through his meanderings. And because he has striven, God forgives him.
Hmm. Okay. Final question. I remember reading the character Aslan from the Narnia series is actually Jesus Christ in the form of a lion and under another name. How much would you say Lewis's understanding of Christ's personality matches with your own? It would also be interesting to hear Vincent's opinion. Go ahead, Charles.
Well, it's very hard because, I've never really thought about Christ's personality per se. I've always assumed it, as you might say. I think the characterizations of Aslan that have certainly contributed to my own thoughts about Christ. For instance, the phrase "he's not a tame lion." Um, Christ is not a tame God. He is what he is. And what he is flies in the face of everything we think we know. He's God and man to start, which is bad enough. Um, he gives life to everything that's good, and he condemns everything that's wrong. But what's right and what's wrong are not always what we think they are, because he's the one who sets the rules, not us. And we don't like that on a very deep level. Uh, Now, of course, the Aslan of the story is, I guess, very much like Christ in my estimation, in his sacrificing himself for those he loves.
Hmm.
Um, and, one of the things that I think about a great deal these days in watching people, young people and old people, and their interactions with each other, we're a very strange race in that our capacity to love is very, very limited, but our desire for love is infinite, unquenchable. And yet, our ability to return that love to others is very, very small. And that's why we very often feel that others are not loving us as much as we deserve, as much as we want, as much as we should get. And yet, we don't stop to think about the fact that we're the same way. Our capacity to return love is very limited.
Mm.
But the reason why our desire for it is infinite is because ultimately we desire the love of Christ. And that is infinite. It's infinite and complete and total. And yet we take it for granted and we don't value it. And yet it's the only source of love that can possibly fulfill our yearnings.
Yeah, I literally just, on my walk today this morning, I was thinking about that. I was thinking, sorry, I'm taking a tangent off of Aslan, but I feel like what you said was so profound. I'd love to expound on that instead. The thing that I was wrestling with for me personally, while I'm doing the things, I'm saying the things, I'm trying to practice my faith more and more. But I felt like I wasn't craving, or I wasn't desiring God the way I desire and go after earthly things, like perhaps success in business. And
Yeah,
that bothered me, because it's that desire that gets you moving forward in that goal.
yeah,
And it bothered me that I didn't have that same sort of drive, you know, that same sort of
yeah,
ambition.
yes.
Um, so I don't know. So at the end of my walk, I just decided I need to pray for that, to get to be able to get that
Well, that's
more.
that's all you can do is pray for it. When I think about heaven, the essence of heaven is the doing of God's will rather than our own. The essence of hell is doing our own rather than God's. I mean, in both places, they're sort of brought to a fine point. In this life of ours, everything is sort of covered up with everything else,
Yeah.
but that ceases at the grave. And I was thinking that, wouldn't it be marvelous to want God's will as naturally and normally as I want my own?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, the very way, like, if I'm a bit thirsty, right, and if there was anything left in this cup, uh, to be able to just as normally and naturally as I think, okay, I'm going to take a sip of water now, to want to do God's will that way, without a second thought, because you know how it is now. When we try to do what we think is God's will, it's a struggle, especially if it involves inconvenience, getting out of bed,
Huh.
that kind of thing.
Father Ripperger, when he was, in a recent video I saw, he was getting information from the devil, and I think he got permission from the bishop to say what he got, but this devil had, I forgot the relationship it was supposed to have with Mary, but it was somehow attached to Mary, and it knew Mary's virtues, and one of the things it got from, in terms of information about Mary from that devil, was that Mary, in all of her sacrifices, in all of her life, she never once, for one single moment, thought about the cost, the human cost of the sacrifice. Not for 1 second. Not even like any hardship or any fasting or whatever.
No.
Like, oh, well, I'm giving up this, and this is pain and suffering.
Yeah,
She never.
the way,
that's mind-blowing to me.
The way we do is we get ready for Lent.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, okay, there's going to be this tremendous suffering and cost, so I better live it up now.
Well, that's what this forthcoming season of Septuagesima is all about.
Yeah.
We have 2 weeks of Mardi Gras. Get it out of your system now.
I wish I was more eager about Lent than I was about Mardi Gras.
Well, that would be nice. Although I remember years ago, your brother and I and the other drones decided we would try to celebrate the 12 days of Christmas.
Okay.
And make a feast out of each day.
Yeah.
And your brother said long about, I think, like January 3rd, my body screams for Lent.
Wow.
I've never forgotten that. That was a real singer. And I think we all felt kind of the same way. We're just like, because, keeping up the feasting and partying for 12 days is tough.
Yeah.
And Mardi Gras is tougher because it's 2 weeks. And in some places, it really begins with the ball season on the Epiphany.
Mm.
So if you can imagine the entire season after the Epiphany, plus the 2 weeks of Septuagesima, given up to balls and parties and lunches and suppers and this and that and blah, blah, blah. Boom. By the time the actual Mardi Gras, the Shrove Tuesday, the Fasching comes along.
Yeah.
You're waiting for midnight. Which I guess is sort of the point. Because it makes Lent something you want. Our problem is we neither feast nor fast. Not really. We neither glut ourselves till we can't take anymore, nor do we fast until we're ready to bite the table.
That's an interesting thought. So you wouldn't say that we don't just more stay on the side of gluttony? You don't think we do that?
Well, not when you look at the way people used to eat.
I mean, certainly, like the image of people going into Walmart versus the way people used to be, your favorite image, right?
Yeah, but that's only because they got a lot more, exercise. I mean, I lose weight whenever I'm here because I don't drive anywhere. And mind you, I'm fairly ginormous in this part of the world, but I've already lost weight since the last time you saw me, and that's just because I've done a lot of walking. And the truth is that the Walmart fat. See, the other thing too is the kind of food, because you got to bear in mind a lot of people subsist off fast foods today, and that will fatten you up more than anything. That's why some conspiracy theorists believe that the reason why so many people are eating fast food is that it's actually endorsed by aliens, because it'll be tastier and fatter, and more delicious.
Who can you go ahead and cite your source on that one?
Did I mention I went to college in Roswell, New Mexico? No, my source is Rod Serling in The Twilight Zone, that wonderful episode To Serve Man.
Oh, okay.
It's a cookbook.
Wow. All right, that's gonna do it for the pre-show. But stay tuned. Full episodes still to come.
You betcha. Hurry up. Don't take off your Washington's. Don't take off your Washington's birthday clothing, your Mardi Gras costumes, or anything like that, because this week we got both.